So, we're supposed to be examining the effects of glaciation in the surrounding area. I feel like I'm turning into a glacier just standing here. I'm gonna walk around a little. I need to get the blood flowing in my veins. What would you need that for? I thought cold and ambiguously undead was part of your aesthetic. It is, but even I have my limits. Pale and interesting is one thing, but catching pneumonia is another. Percy frowned. Percy frowned a lot, which was nothing short of a tragedy, given how sweet her face was. It must have been because she spent so much time in George's company. George was very good at corrupting sweet, innocent things. Not that Persephone was entirely innocent. Whenever she was brought onto the subject of police brutality, the meat industry, increased student loans, or the deplorable way the government kept cutting benefits for the disabled, she became so vehement she could stun even Georgia into silence. I don't think we should walk around too much. It sounds like a bad idea. Why? Where's your sense of adventure? Need I remind you, Georgia, we're on a school trip? There are certain guidelines that need to be followed. I don't want us wandering off by ourselves. We might get separated from the other groups, and I don't want us getting lost. You would say that, Bobby. You're such a killjoy. I'm not trying to be a killjoy. I'm just being sensible. Say what you want, but it all amounts to the same thing. So the first activity we're meant to do is, Percy frowned, holding the sheet Miss Pope had handed to her close to her face. The wind was so cold it stung her fingers, blistering her knuckles so they turned pink. The worksheet flapped in the breeze, as though desperate enough to escape from her grip. Samantha feared it would be whisked away, carried high overhead to the steely blue sky. If that happened, Miss Pope would, undoubtedly, find some way to blame her for it. It was inevitable. Miss Pope attributed almost everything that went wrong in class to Samantha, whether it was the projector not working, the photocopier refusing to print, or the fire alarm going off in the middle of class. Samantha sometimes wondered whether she should feel flattered that Miss Pope considered her a talisman of misfortune. Maybe it gave her a certain kind of power beyond her schoolgirl status, with her rucked up socks and freckled face. Can't you hurry up, Percy? Tell us what we need to do so we can go and get it done. And do it now, please. I'm going to die of exposure out here. Samantha didn't often like agreeing with Georgia. She found her an unpleasant kind of person, but she had to concede on this point. The wind whistled loud and hard, rushing through the denuded boughs of the trees so they trembled fearfully. The sky up above was choked with clouds, a thick, dark grey bower that had threatened to offload biblical proportions of rain at any moment. Samantha shivered. The nape of her neck was unpleasantly exposed. That was one of the advantages of having long hair. It kept you warm. Samantha had never needed to bother with scarves or hats before, thanks to her tangled mane of hair. She wished she had the foresight to wear a blouse with longer sleeves, or a cardigan. Unfortunately, she had been so busy that morning she'd just thrown the first thing on she had found, crumpled on her bedroom floor. Let's see. Our first activity is... will you take this for a moment, Sam? Oh, of course. Samantha took the worksheet from Percy's hands. Then, with one expertly practiced motion, Percy fished her mobile out from her backpack. Her tongue poking out the corner of her mouth, her eyes narrowed in concentration, Percy read through her latest text message, then began to dash off a quick reply. Georgia smirked as she peered over Percy's shoulder. Is your beau bothering you again, Percy? Percy's face flushed. She snapped her phone shut and held it to her chest, glaring at Georgia with unusual intensity. Don't read my messages. They're private. Even to me, your dearest and closest friend. Especially to you. Oh? And what is that supposed to mean? I've not been your friend all these years for nothing, Georgia. I know what you're like. You're utterly incapable of keeping secrets if you think they'll make for interesting stories. This was, of course, completely the wrong thing to say to Georgia Byron. Given she had been friends with Georgia for so long, Percy really should have known that herself. So it's a secret now, is it? That sounds awfully suspicious to me, Percy. What could you be saying, I wonder? What does it matter? You never let me read your messages to your brother. Why should I let you read mine to my boyfriend? That is because my messages to my dear brother, half-brother, let me remind you, are about family concerns. Your messages, however, are of a more salacious cast, correct? Salacious? Like matters of the physical? Just stop it. Why must you try to make my relationship sound so sordid? It is sordid though, isn't it? Why else would a man and a woman be calling and texting each other at all hours? Don't be so crass. Harry would never be so presumptuous. He's sweet and sensitive. He writes me poetry, Georgia. Ah, and it is these men, the ones so narcissistic they fancy themselves poets, who are the very worst. Don't say those kinds of things about Harry. He's been having a rough time lately and he's been feeling a little down. That's why he's been calling and texting me so much lately. He must have been more than a little down, given how very often he keeps sending you messages. Your phone was beeping so much on the bus, I couldn't focus on my book. Of course, Georgia would be able to read on the bus. She was the kind of person who didn't get travel sick. She was just too self-assured to suffer from such an affliction. We have a very strong bond, that's all. Harry tells me everything. That's how close we are. I know from the bottom of my heart that Harry's the one for me. My other self, my platonic egg, my soulmate, if you will. Georgia sighed. She looked distinctly peeved, more exhausted than irate. For a smart girl, Percy, you can be awfully stupid sometimes. What do you mean? You're so idealistic. It's like you don't even live in the real world. Despite your declarations that Harry is your soulmate, you've never even met him in real life. For all you know, he could be a serial rapist. Don't say such horrid things. How can you even make that accusation, and so boldly too? You don't even know anything about him. And neither do you. Not really. I know enough. I'm not a child, Georgia. No, you are not, but between the two of us, who has the most experience with the opposite sex? Well, exactly. And can't you see the warning signs? Warning signs? What warning signs? The guy keeps threatening to kill himself. Don't you think that's just a tiny bit manipulative? Just a tad? It isn't manipulative. He's just a very emotional person. He feels things deeply, like I do. We're a perfect match. Well, if he's as foolish as you are, perhaps it is true. Samantha watched the exchange between the two girls, occasionally broken by the beeping from Percy's phone as another message from the mysterious Harry was beamed through the stratosphere. She did not particularly want to get involved in matters of adolescent romance. She had enough of her worries of her own to deal with, without prying into anybody else's. Roberta, however, did not seem to share Samantha's reservations. She was looking more and more impatient by the second, hands on her hips, foot tapping against the ground. Finally, it seemed she couldn't take it no longer, because she snapped. Hey, I thought we had work to do. Can we save all this chatter for a more appropriate time? Huh? Oh! Percy jumped, eyes wide. Had she forgotten where she was? Hurriedly, she opened her phone and finished her latest text, then sent it flying into the ether with a decisive click of a button. Then, once more with a snap, she shut her fancy phone and slid it back into her bag. I'm sorry. I got a little distracted. I can see that much. Sorry. Samantha turned her head, her short hair fluttering in the cold breeze as she searched for the rest of their class. Hopefully they hadn't fallen too far behind. But... Samantha looked to the left. She looked to the right. She turned in a neat 360-degree circle, inspecting her surroundings. But there was nobody else there. Their fellow classmates had vanished into thin air, swallowed by the hills and valleys of the sprawling countryside. Did that mean they'd been left behind? Samantha bit her lower lip. The colour bled from her face until her cheeks became ashen. Samantha had always loved the countryside. She had pleasant memories of living in the south, in a small village of Ottery St. Mary, until the day her mother had decided to send her to an all-girls boarding school out in the middle of London. But just as much as Samantha had loved growing up in the countryside, she knew well how dangerous it could be. Samantha could still remember that unforgiving night she had spent alone, out amongst the fields, curled up in the corner of a disused cowshed. She had quarrelled with her older sister, and the argument had escalated. Foul names had been exchanged, hair had been pulled, and arms had been scratched. Fearful that her mother would punish her for her misconduct, Samantha had later fled. She ran out into the surrounding fields, even though the darkness was beginning to close in. She had shivered fitfully and fallen in and out of hazy, feverish dreams, curled up in the corner of that dilapidated cowshed with the hole in the roof. When the morning broke, she had been so frozen through with cold she had been unable to stand. If she hadn't been discovered by a passing rambler, Samantha feared to think what might have happened to her. She could have died. And so it was with that, the moment Samantha had realised they were stranded, she started to do what she did best. Panic. You guys? What is it? I don't know if you realize this yet, but, we're the only ones here. Ah! Roberta and Georgia instantly stopped arguing. Both of them turned to look at the other, eyes slightly wider than usual. Like Samantha, they turned to survey their surroundings. The horizon was endless, stretching out in an unbroken expanse of trees and hills, but there were no people. Not for miles around. Everyone had vanished like ghosts, visions, apparitions, even though they had never been there at all. Roberta swallowed, hard, her lashes trembling. Georgia looked unusually abashed, her gaze dropping down to her shoes, which was a first. Samantha had never seen Georgia look ashamed before, not even when she had sauntered into class 20 minutes late. Was it Sam's overactive imagination, or was the evening already beginning to descend? Her own shadow seemed to stretch out behind her, growing ever longer, thinner, and more sinister by the second. I can't believe it. When we actually need to use your phone, it's out of power. This is like something out of a bad horror movie. I'm sorry. Percy looked down at the floor, shamefaced, scuffing the ground with the tip of her trainer. If I'd known we were going to be lost, I wouldn't have spoken to Harry so much on the bus. Curse that Harry. How you torment me, even in your absence. If you weren't so enamored with that stupid, simpering fop, we wouldn't be in this situation. We'd be able to call for help and we wouldn't have to wait around in this godforsaken countryside getting colder and colder with every second. Fuck. I feel like the art's a bit too cute for all this swearing. With his sudden exclamation, Georgia spun about and kicked a nearby tree, hard. Samantha watched from a safe distance, impressed and ever so slightly terrified. She had no doubt that, if that kick had come into contact with her, a few of her ribs would be broken right now. Hey! But Percy was a braver person than Samantha. At least, when the topic of her true love came up. Don't blame Harry for this. He isn't stupid or simpering. I love him. Maybe you do right now, but that will wear off in time. It always does. That's such a cynical way of looking at things. Just because you feel that way doesn't mean I do. You don't want to hear the truth? I'm sorry. True love does exist and you'll find your Prince Charming out there someday. And while I'm at it, do you want me to confirm the existence of Santa and the Easter Bunny too? It's all well and good acting so high and mighty, but I don't see you doing anything to help us. That's right. If you're so smart, Georgia, why don't you try to fix everything? Where's your phone? I dropped it in the swimming pool last Sunday. It's totally dead. Why would you even take your phone to the pool with you? Georgia shrugged. I don't know. To show off to the other girls on the swim team, I guess. It was the latest model. And how much did that cost you? I don't want to say. Just thinking about it makes me want to cry. Percy rolled her eyes. And you say I can be stupid sometimes. How are you even able to afford all the expensive things you break and lose? Your family isn't that rich. We're not, but you can get pretty far in life when you're literally a lady. Lady Byron. Sounds kinda cool, huh? Like a mistress in a gothic novel. Makes me feel like you should be living out in the wild moors in a mansion, a manned wife in the attic, and a bunch of deformed servants to do with as I will. If there was one thing Georgia was proud of, above all else, it was that title. Samantha had heard rumours that whenever Georgia went into Starbucks, she'd always stipulated that the barista had to write Lady Byron on her cup. Well, given that she was a lady in name only, with no money at all, she probably had to get her kicks where she could. And what about you two? Do you have your phones? I didn't bring it with me. I forgot. Well, I can't say I'm that surprised. Since you managed to forget to bring half your hair with you, my hopes weren't that high. Samantha brought a hand to her hair, frowning. Did it really look that bad? And what about you, Bobby? You're sensible, right? You remembered to bring your phone, didn't you? Of course I remembered. Unlike Sam, I'm not so scatterbrained that I'd leave it at home, and I wasn't clumsy enough to drop it in the pool either. Oh, good job, Bobby. I could almost kiss you. Please don't. And don't call me Bobby either, we're not friends. Madame, you wound me. And yet, despite her protestations of the most horrible heartbreak, Georgia seemed to recover from being rebuffed incredibly quickly. Is Bob alright then? Even worse. With a long suffering sigh, Roberta drew her phone out of her pocket. It was not quite as sleek and fancy as Percy's, and it was undoubtedly less expensive than George's had been, rest in peace, but it was more than capable of getting the job done. It's a good thing one of us has a functioning phone. You better thank me for this, Georgia. Not like I'm doing it for you or anything. Hey, are you trying to guilt-trip me? Maybe. You deserve to feel guilty every once in a while. It'll work wonders for that ego of yours. You're even more egotistical than I am, Bobby. You just hide it better, behind that old lady facade of yours. Old lady? That's right. You're just like Lillian. You're both so stuffy. Arrogant too. I'm nothing like Lillian. You are. What was it the pair of you said when you were running to be on the student council? That you were going to do your best to represent the student body, to stand up for us when we were being unfairly persecuted? You wanted to keep a bear in your room, you cretin. Of course we were going to refuse. But the student handbook only specified we weren't allowed to keep cats or dogs. It didn't say anything about bears. That's because we assumed, wrongly it seems, that nobody would be stupid enough to assume that those rules did not, logically, extend to bears. My, somebody's touchy. I'm touchy because I'm trying to concentrate and your antagonism is not helping. Concentrate? How hard can it be to find a phone number? You did save Miss Pope's number into your phone, didn't you? Of course I did. I'm simply having trouble because you're distracting me. Then hand your phone over here. I'll call her for you. What? Hey, wait, what are you doing? But Roberta's cries fell on deaf ears. Sweeping in like her black hair tumbling out of her. God, imagine if she had back hair. Ugh. Tumbling about her shoulders, Georgia fished Roberta's phone out of her hands in a matter of milliseconds. Oh, now this is interesting. Georgia giggled, Roberta's phone secure in one hand. Of course, as everybody knows, the mobile phone is one of the most precious possessions a person can have in the 21st century. No longer are phones mere tools used to contact others, they are far, far more than that. They are more like lifelines, a very extension of their owner's psyche, part of their soul, and a very personal part of Roberta's soul, filled with her most important private memories, had suddenly been wrenched right out of her hands. Naturally, Roberta was upset about this. In fact, upset was an understatement. She was almost livid with rage. Georgia, give that back! It's personal. Personal, huh? I wonder. Just how many personal things are stored on here? Oh, now this is interesting. Who is Edmund, and why have you sent each other so many texts? You... Don't just read through my stuff like that! Give it back! Georgia, this is really too much. You really shouldn't steal a girl's phone like that. But why? Bobby deserves it. It's 'cause she's always so uptight. I'm uptight because I have to spend time with you. You're always trying to provoke me. Only because I always get a reaction. You must not be very smart, Bobby, if you don't even know that. Don't try to blame this on me. This is your fault. Can you two set aside your differences for once? We need that phone. It's the only way we can call for help. Oh? Are you worried, Sam? I bet you wish Lily were here to hold your hand, right? That... Lillian has nothing to do with this. I don't want to talk about it. Because she hung you out to dry too, huh? Just like she did with Percy. For all she spoke about caring for her fellow classmates, she didn't really make much of an effort to fulfill her promises. This has nothing to do with Lillian or Persephone or the student council. Give me my phone back right now. What if I don't want to give it back? What if I don't want to freeze to death in the middle of the countryside? Hand it over. Come on, Georgia. This is childish even for you. I don't want to be wandering around here when it gets dark. It's more dangerous out here than you may think. Oh, don't act so serious, you guys. I'll give it back. Soon. But first though, yeah, Bobby, you have to apologise. Apologise? For what? For being such a sycophant who makes promises but never keeps them? Then maybe I'll think about it. You really are impossible. Of all the nerve. Really? You think you're the one? I think you're the one being impossible, Bobby. Stop calling me Bobby. My name is not Bobby. Now give me my phone back, now. Roberta reached forwards, trying to snatch her phone from George's hand. Georgia stepped backwards, trying to hold the phone out of Roberta's reach. A move doomed to failure, really, given Georgia was quite a bit shorter than Roberta was. Roberta's hand collided with George's. If they had been actors in a movie, that moment of impact would have been shot in a close-up in slow motion. No! Roberta could only watch, eyes wide in horror, as her phone flew out of George's grasp, making an elegant arc in the air. Percy moved forwards, attempting to catch it before it hit the ground, but it was too late. Percy had always been dreadful at sports. That was the main reason why she had been bullied so terribly in her PE class. She couldn't have caught a ball to save her life. And she certainly couldn't have caught that phone either, even if it could have potentially saved the lives of 4 people. The phone hit the ground hard, but not with a thud as one might have expected. Instead, it landed with an unpleasant squelch. It was a similar kind of sound that was made when shoes sunk into mud. All 4 girls looked at the ground in almost perfect unison. There lay Roberta's phone, the extension of Roberta's soul, their final link back to the civilization, the only sign of the 21st century for miles around. It was resting neatly, almost as though it had been preordinated by some greater being, right in the centre of a large, dark brown cow pat. Oh, for fuck's sake!